All right, welcome back to another SuperCoach video with me, JD. Joining me is the #1 ranked SuperCoacher over the last 3 years, according to @Data SuperCoach. He has had back-to-back top 10 finishes, finishing both 7th and 5th over the last 2 years, which is an incredibly rare feat and explains why he's ranked #1. You can find him on Twitter @Babylon9268, or you can talk to him with me right now, Dyslexia Untied, or Tom. How you going, mate?
Yeah, good, mate. That was a nice intro. Thanks very much for that.
Well, we're about to go even further because you have had a very, very busy preseason joining Moreira's Magic, which is a name I'm going to try not to again because I can't pronounce it. So for those of you who don't know, Selby over at MM, I might just use the initials, won AFL Fantasy in back-to-back years and has had many other high finishes in fantasy, and has transitioned into providing season guides and podcasts over the last few years for the AFL community. He's raised nearly $100,000 for the Starlight charity doing so by giving a portion of the proceeds from that preseason guide to the charity itself. And it only makes sense that he adds the best fantasy format to his preseason guide, with the best ever player, apparently, according to the Hall of Fame, riding the SuperCoach side, which is, of course, you. So the guide itself costs $29.95 for the preseason, but is well worth it. Includes all of Selby's and your player notes for both the fantasy and SuperCoach formats. And it's not just, all the common players that I tend to talk about. It's all 750, 60 something players it's got a profile on every single one of them. It's got player notes. It's also got stats from the last few years, which we'll go over a couple of examples of those in a minute. And you've also built out the team, adding AFL draft expert Chris Dorey, who writes the rookie profiles. This preseason alone, I believe, was over 120,000 words. It's been written across the player profile. So if you are into your fantasy or SuperCoach, this is definitely the preseason guide you should be signing up for. And then Selby himself does podcasts with both former Premiership Hawk Xavier Ellis and then yourself for the SuperCoach side. So yeah, lots and lots to get into. And in fact, they believe in their content so much there is a 100% money back guarantee, I found out, within the first 24 hours. So if you don't like what you get, you can return it. And we're also going to be running a giveaway for the viewers of this video. So I think we're going to run it as a Twitter giveaway. So keep your eyes peeled at my Twitter at Jackson Davey. And there'll be some more details around that. But enough of the preamble for now. We might actually get into some proper SuperCoach discussion. Is there anything else, any other accolades you want to kind of give either yourself or Selby before we move on to some SuperCoach discussion?
No, certainly none for me. I think, Selby, he's a two-time winner. And I think last year there was a fair chunk of that top 10 came from subscribers. So certainly from his side, he's given out great advice on the fantasy side. And it really helps you build your team, I think. So, Yeah,
and I think one of the most pleasing parts from my side is, individual player assessment analysis is great, but I love talking about like the theory, the strategy, the structure of SuperCoach. And I think that's really what makes the game interesting. And there's a lot of that on the side as well, which is really good. So we might actually jump into a little bit of a preview of what signing up gets you. So just bear with me for a minute while I bring up the screen. And I don't know, Tom, I don't know how you feel about running us through it, but I guess I can point to a couple of things that I understand so far from my limited time using it. But this is an example of a player profile. So we've got George Hewitt up here. And of course, this is on the SuperCoach side. If you're an AFL fantasy person, you toggle across the other side to get Selby's notes. So it's got your current ranking for them at the moment. So currently don't see him as a very highly ranked defender for this year, which I might fight you on. But there you go. And then it's got a whole bunch of really useful stats here, all the way from back, when he was drafted, what pick he was at, his current age, these types of things, through to his price analysis now, where he's priced at, and, based on some scenarios here, whether he's presents value or not. And then you also have some really interesting things over here, like key stats. So my understanding of this one here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that this looks at the top 6 players for that position and then compares where he scored at last year compared to those. Compared to the top 6 defenders, he averaged a lot less in terms of possessions, but his efficiency was in line. He won more contested ball, which you'd maybe expect as a midfielder versus defenders. Had less clangers, which is interesting, but I guess that ties in with the less disposals, and was quite a good tackler. So lots of really good things there. And then you also have like a bunch of other stuff. So you've got the splits here. I know in AFL Fantasy, Selby's really big at looking over their run home, how they go in the last 5 games to see if they're, building up to a big next year. So you can see someone like Hewitt, for example, who his last 5, including finals, like outperformed, I think, pretty heavily. 106 average finals here versus him being priced at 73. And then you've also got, a bunch of scenarios here around how's he scored in the past, what it would look like, I think, with different time on grounds, which comes up here a little bit as well. And then I think you've also got some scoring consistency in there. And then, of course, your comments. I've kind of done my quick scattergun approach, but maybe it's best to hear from you, Tom. What do you like using in here, and how do you think it applies to a SuperCoach world? Because I know, as I mentioned, Selby originally designed this with the fantasy format in mind, and some of those things are probably less important to us. So what do you look at, and what do you find most useful from a SuperCoach perspective?
The first place I go will be the splits from last year. So really looking at, I guess, what they scored over the whole season, how that correlated to CBAs or kick-ins if they're a defender and they're taking those. First half, second half, and then looking at the last 5 and just sort of seeing how those numbers impacted that score. It's a really good, I guess, guide to just look at it quickly, and then you can get a good understanding. All right, okay, the role changed. They moved to the back line. They started taking kick-ins. How did that impact their score, or vice versa if they moved into the midfield? Someone like a Dawson, who we know had that clear role change. How did that impact them? And you can sort of go from there. Okay, there was less kick-ins, but obviously the role change resulted in a higher score. So that's probably the first place I go. And yeah, I think having the price at, which can be sometimes a little bit hard to find on certain players. So really, you've just got it all there right in front of you. And I think it can give you just a quick look at a player and help inform your decision whether you like them or not.
Yeah, and you've also got your little icons here on like outside roll, the rolling 22. So this is outside your best 22 on field, and then you've got more midfield time. So this is what he'd need to do better this year, is get that more midfield time, which you would expect. And then players like George Hewitt will, of course, get updates throughout the preseason as we learn more information. So with Walsh going down, maybe that changes where you see Hewitt kind of land finishing overall and, his outlook for the year. Definitely see you moving him up greater than D37 before the preseason's out, but maybe a conversation for a different time. And,
I was just going to say, he'll be coming up. How far? I'm not too sure. Obviously, that Walsh injury certainly opens up a little bit more midfield minutes that he was already pegged for. But I'm not sure he'll get all the way up into the pointy end.
Yeah. So while you have play ratings for all the players, let's look at the one that's ranked number 1 for the midfield, Jack Moerira. I'm not going to give away the full top 10 or what you've got to rank to each position at the moment, but obviously one that's in a lot of our teams at the moment, and maybe another good example to go through what kind of the season guide gives and how it's useful even for the premiums. When we've obviously looked at someone who was like more value price, is obviously right at the top end. I think like the key stats for me is really interesting for these types of players to see where they do better or worse against the other top 8 mids. But how would I use something like this to evaluate Moerira in the preseason?
Yeah, Moerira. I think that positional rank from last year, first in price, first in average, first in points per minute, first in the last 5, career high first. Like it just paints the picture that this guy's a gun. And then you look across to the history over the last 5 years: first, fifth, third, and then 18th in 2017. You got to go a fair way back, and he was still very much a viable player there. So I think someone like this, it just, I don't know, will confirm probably what everyone knows that's watching this video. Moerira's an absolute gun. You can sort of have a look at those CBAs as well. Like they're right up there. They sort of didn't vary throughout the year like other Dogs players did. If you wanted to go compare them to maybe a Bont or I guess a Dunkley, Treloar, and you can sort of see that role is consistent, and the scoring stayed consistent as well. With Moerira, he sort of speaks for himself. He's an absolute champion, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, and this is the beauty of the guide. It's not just for someone like Jack Moerira, but 766 players, which I'm sure is actually being added with some of the supplemental signings and stuff that's going on at the moment. So huge. And then you can see here you've got like podcasts, both on the SuperCoach and fantasy side. So lots of content here. And then there's a change log as well, which goes through all the most recent changes that have happened with your rankings or players. So as news happens and things get updated, it's quite easy to keep on top of. So really nice. So yes, if you are interested in checking that out, go to the website that I've got up above and you can find out more information then. And as I mentioned, we're running a giveaway for that as well, which is pretty exciting. Very good tool to be using in the preseason, having a lot of fun with it. But what I'm even more excited for is getting to pick your brain a little bit. So let's jump into some Q&A. And I've got a lot, but I want to first know, what do you think differentiates you from other super coaches? Why have you been able to stay so consistent where others haven't?
It's a really hard question. I think I can only talk for myself and not other coaches. I think over the last 2 years, I've come in with a very concrete mindset around how I was going to pick my side, and I've stuck to that over the last 2 years. And obviously, the results have been pretty good. So I think I've found something that works. I guess for me. When I'm picking my starting side, I'm just trying to avoid risk. I think the more risk you take, the less chance it's going to pay off, and that's really going to result in a lack of trades, which I also think is something that's really held me in good stead as the year has progressed over the last two. So you don't want to go with too many. I haven't gone with too many speculative picks. Really tried to be really confident in those players that I'm picking. They're going to, if they're premiums, they're going to be top 6 forward or defenders, top 8 mids. Come season's end. Obviously, you can't get them all right, but if that's what you're using to inform your decision, well, that should be a pretty good guide. And then minimizing the risk is going to help manage those trades, which I think for me over the last 2 years is really what set me apart from some of the other coaches. You mentioned before SuperCoach data. He has a great website that had a lot of the data on other coaches. So I was able to go in there, have a look at how many trades other coaches had towards the back end of the season. And I was really strong in those numbers. So sometimes 3, sometimes 4, even more trades than other coaches around that top 30 mark coming into the last 5. So managing those trades throughout the year helped me either jump up or stay up.
So the goal was obviously to finish first and you've fallen just short. What do you think you need to do differently to actually realize that? Or is it you've kind of found the right formula and you just need to have a year where a few things fall into place?
I probably could have taken an extra risk. So last year, Tex Walker, the one that got away, I think I had the opportunity to trade him and I thought, no, next week it's not going to happen. He can't put 3 of these together in a row, and he did. And the ones that got on really were able to kickstart their upgrade cadence. I think for me, like if I did that, who knows? It probably wouldn't have got me to the top because SuperCoach Mama, she was well ahead. But at the same time, it probably would have helped a fair bit. And that sort of one that I wish I took. So maybe as I go forward, I'd take that risk. I certainly would have last year if I could.
Now, I can't imagine what it's like to own 1 tracksuit, let alone 2. How often do they actually get a wear?
Not at all. I wore my first one the day it came in, chucked it on, took a photo, took it off. That was it. The second one I actually ordered in my partner's size. So I got it to fit my partner, which certainly isn't going to fit me. One, trying to bribe her to let me watch more footy. She gets something out of the SuperCoach journey. And yeah, I just thought I can't wear 2, which I'm kind of spewing about because the second one's a little bit more suave. And maybe I'd wear that out. So nah, not at all.
I'm surprised there hasn't been like the Twitter flex of you two on the couch or something like that watching footy, because you're the only one that can do that in the SuperCoach community. I'd love to see like the dual tracksuit. All right, so obviously teaming up with Selby, I guess the big question here is, are you going to make him play SuperCoach this year? Is he going to make you play fantasy?
Well, I don't have to make him. He's already made a side. He was sending me through some text, I think yesterday. He's just moved out one player and brought in Dangerfield. So I think he's pretty excited to jump across. That was my face. Look, it's an underpriced pick that could go big, but there's a little bit of risk there. If you know Selby, he's very much what he made his name in AFL fantasy was that mid-price madness and looking for those real value options across all lines. So he's certainly going to bring that into SuperCoach. And I think he's looking at me like, why aren't you picking these players? It's like, well, you've only got a certain amount of trades. So he seems pretty keen. And for me, I'm really looking forward to jumping across to fantasy. I've gone to make a side a few times and looked at it and just like, I don't understand these prices. I don't understand what's going on. Not doing it, just focusing on SuperCoach. But after I've been able to have a chat to Selby, look at sort of what his strategy is and listen to a few of his podcasts that he does with Zave, I'm right on board. So I've probably spent almost equal time across my side and that side trying to get the mix right.
Oh, no, I don't know. I feel like I should be fading you now. I worry about anyone that spends too much time on fantasy. I know George has been doing it as well. And it's just like, so I've put together one team and it feels like all of the players that like you want to select for SuperCoach, but you know you can't because they're just like mid-price. They won't end up like there. You just fill your fantasy team with those and then you're done. And it feels like, oh, this isn't how the game's meant to be played. Like this is so strange. Yeah. I could see... it's good to know at least like Selby won't be real competition this year. That's fine. That's good.
You never know. Danger could come out of nowhere and capture that form of the second half of last year.
So when chatting to Selby, have there been any AFL fantasy specific strategies or concepts that you feel like you're going to borrow or adopt into your game?
Not really. Like they're very different games, and I think that's probably why it's a little bit daunting trying to move across and play the other format. So not a whole lot. I think haven't been able to bounce off ideas around those extra 5 trades is probably something that we've had a chat about and what that might open up for you. Obviously, I think in fantasy you've got 47 on the year in a win it or lose it format, so you have to make the trades. You get 2 every week, 3 in the buys. So obviously that allows for those mid prices and trying to pick those value picks, and you don't need to make as much cash off a rookie or a mid pricer. So I think just having a chat around that, and for me, I think that's probably opened my thinking that you could probably go an extra mid pricer in comparison to other years. I guess maybe like the DPP as well, seeing how they sort of tackle that, because it's a bit of an unknown for us over at the SuperCoach side. But it doesn't really seem like it's going to have that much of an impact. You don't want it really impacting your starting side from what I can gather.
No, I mean, from what I saw as well, like there were only a couple of players that got DPP last year in round 6 that would have been SuperCoach relevant anyway, which would have been like Kelly and Darcy for our forward line, and that's it. So it seems like playing around with that too much probably isn't going to lead to success, but who knows, maybe that last year was a one-off and we got a ton of really relevant players this year, like McGrath, halfback, or who knows what it could be. So obviously preseason's in full flight at the moment, and it feels like this preseason more than others, it's just been so much news and whispers and kind of like little bits and pieces you get of what's going on, both from official and unofficial sources. How much attention do you pay to this stuff? What sources do you use, and how do you kind of cut through the noise for the information that's useful versus just a puff piece?
Not a whole lot, to be honest. Like I think the players that you're sort of looking at when SuperCoach opens, you consider them for a reason. I think when you're getting these updates, I certainly wouldn't be looking at AFL Club puff pieces because they're just not relevant at all. They're either trying to build confidence or
not on the Rayner hype train.
No, not really. Like you obviously got to take a look at him when someone's getting those sort of minutes in the midfield. But I think, that's going to be a confidence boost for a young player coming off an ACL. He's probably fit, but I'm not sure anyone's as that fit that warrants that sort of media attention around their fitness. So not a whole lot. I think you sort of want to, the track watches are really good. So if a player is participating in full training, that's obviously really good to know. If they're running laps, so they're having managed loads, you sort of want to take note of that. But really, you want to be picking players that are proven and you're really confident in. And an article on the Brisbane Lion website's not going to do that for me.
All right, then talking about structure a little bit. In the preseason guide, you and Selby go through previous winning teams and I guess your own in detail and kind of walk through what that blueprint for success has kind of looked like in SuperCoach over the last few years. You've kind of touched on this a little bit with the extra trades, meaning maybe we could go an extra mid-pricer, but do you see yourself moving away from that blueprint much this year? Or you kind of see yourself sticking to what's kind of worked in the past?
Little bit of both, to be honest. Like I think you want to, like when I'm picking my side, it's all around the confidence I have in the players. Are they going to be season-long keepers? Really, I guess the structure can vary depending on where those players are priced. So when you sort of look at the teams of last year, I think it was a lot more top liners, where this year when you're sort of looking at those forward value options that we'll probably get to in a bit, like that's going to dictate, I guess, how you structure up, and then that might free up some cash for some other mid prices. So as a rule, like I'll probably still go in with the 12 players that I think are season long keepers. If that means that I can get, you know, an extra mid price because I've got some value options, maybe I go one extra. But we're also got to look at, there's a lot of rookies that are coming through that are really expensive. So I think that mix will probably stay the same. It's just the prices might be a little bit different. I think that mix kind of works. And I probably don't want to go too far away from it.
Yeah, so speaking of, I guess, formations and structure, obviously we know the rookies kind of dictate what we end up going with, but you're able to kind of share where your team's currently at. I think you mentioned 12 primos there. Is that the structure you're looking at, and how's it then split across the lines?
Yeah, pretty evenly. I have to do my maths on this. Is this 12? So 3, 4, 2, and 3 is kind of how I'm looking. Yeah. Like I'm really struggling not to have 4 in the forward line because there's just, I guess, too many options that I like. Right now, being left out has to be one of either Heaney or Taron Thomas, who I think are both really good options without seeing them in the competitive stuff. And then I don't have Jordan De Goey as well, who I think, you know, a bit of an unknown. Obviously, there's that rib injury at the moment. He's had a pretty limited preseason, so he's out. But like, you know, if he plays one of these competitive hitouts and dominates, and he's got 65% CBAs, well, I might have to jump on that. So yeah, look, it's difficult, and I'm really hoping the rookies aren't in the forward line because that's where I want to go deep.
Yeah, I think De Goey's news today was that rib was actually proper broken. He's going to be out for a couple of weeks, so I think that's probably one that is a little bit easier to scratch off the list. Yeah. So sorry, it was 3 down back, 4 in the midfield, 2 primo rucks, and then 3 in the forward line. So just on the 2 forward rucks, I mean, this definitely feels like it has been, set and forget the last few years with Gawn and Grundy being the go-to. A little bit more up in the air this year. Have you been tempted by one of those mid-price rucks at all, like a Bruce or a Witts or that type of value option?
Not at R2. I think one of those big boys is gonna, like, at least 2 of them are gonna be, you know, really good scorers. I think Gawn, like, there's some question marks about him, but at the same time, you know, it's Gawn. He's going to score well. He's going to do well. Is he going to hit those 130s? Maybe not, but he's going to be a very, very viable option. Darcy and Grundy, they're both, well, if Darcy's fit, I think I seen today he's got his thumb in a splint maybe. Yeah, so he's had a lot of niggles all preseason, but he had niggles all last year and went huge. So, yeah, I think rucks are typically, the elite rucks are really good scorers. I think we at least have 3 very good options that could be elite scorers, and I don't really want to play around with a Bruce who's obviously presents a fair bit of risk in terms of how he'll score or what his role in the side's going to be long term.
Now, you said Bruce not at R2, but would you consider him at R3? I know that's a lot of money to park on the bench, which is a conversation a lot of people, that a lot of people are very uncomfortable at doing that. Is that something you've considered?
Yeah, I've played around with it. I think depending on those mid prices and the way that, you know, which ones you select. So if you end up avoiding aggression and, I don't know, heaven forbid you go to a Charlie Curnow, that would open up that option to put Prusy on the bench. You're probably going to make similar cash if you see that from someone like a Curnow. And typically when I'm starting my sides, I want all 30 playing. So if there isn't a cheap rookie, Hayes from Port or I think Hayes from North, Saints is going to be a ruck. Yeah. If they're named round 1, I'll go them just because they're cheaper. But at the same time, I'd like to have that option there. And if someone's going to be generating cash, if Bruce is playing, he's going to generate cash. I don't like to risk it at R2, but at R3, I think it's viable depending on how the rest of your team structures up.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, I'm also someone that's a big advocate of not starting a loophole because inevitably we get one by round 3 or 4. So kind of good to hear that you're on the same wavelength there. So when thinking about your starting team, obviously you can have a little bit of a trade-off between generating value and the price of your team overall versus scoring more points early. have you got a kind of preference or mindset you go in when thinking about these things, or are you kind of just picking best players? Like, does this kind of value points trade-off come into equation for you?
Cash is king in this game, so you want to generate cash, or you want to have players that are going to be season-long keepers. So not really. I think if you're going to structure up your side, similar to how I have done over the last couple of years, I think that's going to put you in good stead. Obviously, I've come top 10 twice, so it's obviously worked. I've never considered it, so I think I'm not really going to be delving too deep into that. I think if you've got the rookies that are going to make you cash, and you've picked those players that are going to be in your team by the season end, it'll all work itself out. I think that might be just overcomplicating it a little bit, and you might be looking at the price of players rather than their actual performance.
Yeah, so it's like really curious because I know Selby, when he's won fantasy in the past, he's had maybe like all of his players but one or two kind of go up in value. I feel like that's realistically not possible with SuperCoach, just given that you're trying for the top liners in a lot of the positions. So if you're selecting like your McRae's, inevitably his price is going to go down just based on the magic number. So what is that kind of formula in your mind between how many can you pick kind of knowing they're already top priced and won't provide any value versus finding those premiums that do like have some upside at their price?
Yeah, it's the players that are going to hurt you if you don't have them. They're the ones you got to pay top dollar for. So Jake Lloyd in defense, he's probably not top price, but I think, yeah, if you don't have Jake Lloyd, like especially with Hall going down, like it's probably he's going to outscore the rest. Like he could easily outscore the rest of the line by 10 points. And if you don't have him, that's really going to hurt. Same with like you can't have them all, but I think when you sort of look at that top four, maybe even top five, when you add Titch to it, if you went with one of those, you might be pretty deep, but like you're really limiting your captain's options. So you at least need two, maybe even three of them, really strong captain's options. And I think, you've got to pay up for a couple, because if you don't, one, you're going to be left behind when it comes to captain's choices, but two, you're also going to really struggle to bring them in. You know, you're not going to bring in a 650k player off a one up, one down. So if you structure up your side right, you should be able to, I guess you should be able to compensate for paying up top dollar for those couple of players.
Well, we got trade boosts this year that can solve the one up, one down for a 650k problem, right? We can just do 2 down, 1 up for like 5 rounds straight and fill out our midfield.
A very brave move.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I feel like that's the type of aggressive player that could win the 50k this year. All right, so this year, maybe more so than some of the others, we've got a plethora of really interesting mid prices. What's your feel on them overall as a cohort, and can you see yourself starting more than previous years?
As a cohort, they're really strong. I think in comparison to the last couple of years, we've got a lot of players that are coming off injuries that sort of present a lot of upside. With that, they all obviously present a fair bit of risk because they're cheap for a reason. But I think overall, like a lot of them are strong, could easily make that 150k mark that makes them a success. And I think, it's going to be a lot easier to find 4 of them that are going to be really good picks rather than, I think last year I started 4 and only 2 of them worked out.
Yeah, I think I had both Young and Clark in the backline last year, which was like the thing that held me back, like from really finishing high up. So if you've got any tips on how I can avoid those this year, that would be useful. I
started Clark as well, so get off them early is probably I guess they're risk for a reason. So you want if they don't work, you just got to move off, and there might be another one there that's a good option.
Yeah, I think that's like the interesting thing this year as well, which is that even if you don't pick the right one, there seems to be lots that are at similar price points. So there's like a lot around the 270k, there's a lot around the 220k, for example. And so if you kind of miss on one, it feels like a really good year because you can just swap out to the one that succeeds. Obviously, you want to hit and save the trade, but it just seems like it's a little bit safer than in previous years where if you missed on that mid-pricer, then it was like downgrading all the way to a rookie and having 150k in your bank, which never feels great.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm interested to know, what are the popular players that you are really against picking at the moment?
Against?
Yeah, I've already mentioned one of mine jokingly, which is Rayner. I'm like big anti-Rayner at the moment. But I'm curious who you kind of fading early on in the preseason.
Yeah, look, those injury risks up forward, I think, just going off the SuperCoach Plus sort of percentage of ownership, I know Duncan's probably going to come out of a few, but like Duncan, Treloar, I think those players just present too much risk. The upside isn't massive, especially when it comes to Duncan. There is an upside there, but it's not huge, and like I don't think the risk outweighs the reward there. And someone like Treloar, I think is just too risky. So it's probably those guys. I think I've seen Cripps has fairly high ownership as well.
I thought 8% or something.
Yeah, which is too high, especially before we've seen him play. So, look, I think most of those sort of top guys are there for a reason. I think there's not too many traps this year, and I think people are sort of sticking away from the sort of speculative sort of bottom of those top 15 mids as well. So, like someone like a Danger, I probably wouldn't be looking at as well. Just, I guess, the risk there. The upside is there, but like if it doesn't work, you've got to trade out. And I just don't think someone like that is worth it either.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. What about on the mid-pricer range? Is there any of the mid-prices that you really don't like starting at the moment?
So really, it's the breakout. So someone like sort of the upper mid-pricer. So it depends on where your cutoff is. But like someone like a Sarong, I've seen him in a fair few sides. That's not a very good pick for mine. You need him to be a top line premium. So I think that's probably a bit too risky. Moerira from Adelaide, that just presents with so much risk. He could be a good selection, but I think if he got injured in round 3 or round 4, when Coleman's gone up, you're going to be able to go nowhere. So that's just someone that I would stay away from.
All right, excellent. So we've kind of talked about, I guess, players that are more popularly owned. But when it comes to like thinking about pods, do these weigh into your considerations at all in your starting team, or do you kind of ignore ownership and just focus on whoever you think's the best?
Yeah, I'll ignore them. I think if you're looking for a pod, typically they're going to be a pod for a reason. If you're really, really big on them, their ownership shouldn't matter, I don't think. I think last year, I think Butters was a fairly big pod. I think he was in 7% to start, but like that wasn't why I started him at all. I was actually nervous about starting him because he was a pod. And I think the year before, my only pod would have been Jordan Ridley as a breakout. So I was really confident on him just because I was a Bomber fan, really watched his role and really liked how he was performing. He was getting those kick-ins, and he was not going to be doing any lockdown jobs, I guess, based on his size as well. I didn't expect him to go to the heights he did, but at the same time, they were the only two. And I was really, really confident that they were going to be good sort of money-making players. It had nothing to do with their ownership stat.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, no, that's like the way I kind of say it is your team overall of the combination of your 30 players is what makes your team unique, not like the individual picks that you have. So yeah. That's great to hear.
I actually think the antipod is more relevant. Like if you were thinking of not starting Dunkley, who I think is in like 60% of teams or something like that, that's where it sort of comes into it. I'd rather go towards a really popular player, so I don't get hurt by them, rather than going to away from the crowd and getting torched when it doesn't work.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so how much does the players buy have an impact on whether or not you'll start them? And does the, I guess, risk of COVID kind of weigh into that a little bit as well, where you maybe don't want to pick too many players from the same team?
I think just typically I wouldn't pick too many from the same team. Try and sort of separate it. And I don't think there's that many top liners in too many teams, maybe bar the Bulldogs. So if I looked at my side and I had 3 from one team, I'd probably be a little bit nervous. When it comes to the buys, I suppose like it certainly is relevant. Like you got to balance your team out, and especially the premiums. I think you don't want to be too focused on it though. I'll use it when I'm sort of separating between 2 players I like. Say if you're tossing up between an Oliver and a Titch, or an Oliver and a Took or something. I don't know what their buys are, but if they've got different buys, choosing the one that works better for your structure if you really just can't split them. You obviously don't want to be too heavy on one one end. Don't really look at your rookies. Really, by the time the bye comes, that first bye, you're going to be pretty strong in terms of your full 22. You'll be close enough to it that it shouldn't matter. And that's where I really look at it, is when I'm making those trades. Okay, there's 3 players that I could get to that I really like. Who's got the buy that works for me? And I'll go from there.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, great. Who is one player that you would love to have in your side, but your structure currently won't allow it?
Rao. So that price point is the real awkward one. So when you're looking at someone that's priced as he is, what is he? 340. Yeah, 342. Yeah. Like he needs to go 100, really. High 90s, which I think, like sort of puts him on that edge. Like he's obviously shown that massive season. I think he had that, 171 in his second game, something like that. So he's got the ceiling. Like he's certainly got that scoring ability. And if a lot of people were on him and you weren't, and he sort of went on a run like that, that would be really hard to chase. So he's probably the one. And there's obviously a lot of question marks there as well. So,
yeah. What would he have to do in the preseason for you to select him? Or do you just think there's no way given the price point?
No. If he plays really well and shows sort of that form that he did when he started his career, I think I'd probably jump on. Like, I think the champion data are going to be doing the stats after the fact for these games. So we should get a good indication of how their scores are in SuperCoach. It probably won't be the best indication, but at least it will give us one. If he went like 110 plus in both, I don't think I could not select him. If he pops out like a 70 and a 95, I'll avoid him, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a 1 day delay. So I'm guessing they've got people watching the next day. But if it was anything like what the footage was we saw on KO, I don't know how well they're going to go on that, because there was like shots where, someone's taking a kick out and they've got it like on 4 random people in the crowd, and then it cuts back to the field and you've got no idea who just took the kick, or like whether they played it or not. So I don't know. The SuperCoach scores may not be the most reliable for the scratch matches, at least anyway.
Just do what they did last year and give the points to Bont.
Yeah, well, I mean, never fails. All right, so I guess the last few questions around how you consider picking players, and then we might move on to some player comparisons, or I guess trading off against each other. So how much of the following weigh into your player consideration when evaluating them during the preseason? So their injury history.
A fair bit. Like that's pretty big, but it's also a risk reward proposition, I think. So if they present a ton of value and they've got that scoring history, you've got to consider them. But at the same time, try to avoid, like if you can, avoid them. But at the same time, like if you've got someone that's just going to make a ton of cash, like really like jumping on Hall, I think it, like not at the start of last year, but people jumped on, and he could have broken down at any moment, really. But the upside was there. So you've just got to weigh that up, and also assess how fit they are.
And so I guess within this question, what are some of the injuries that you tend to avoid more so than others?
Yeah, soft tissues. I think someone like Dunkley, he had a shoulder. So, surgery looks fine, no strapping. Okay, let's go. If someone's had a bunch of calves and they're over 30, like a Duncan, you got to put a line through them straight away. Soft tissues you want to avoid because they can break down at any moment. Similarly, like Treloar, I guess, like obviously he's had a lot of injuries, but I think he did 2 hammies at one time. That's not a great sign.
No, that was the classic. I think he was kicking, not chasing someone down, but he was getting chased down and he got like pushed as he kicked and did both hammies at once. Like, it was pretty bad. Okay. And then how much do you weigh in consideration of full preseason, and does it matter more or less for certain types of players?
That's massive. That's probably the biggest one, I think. If they haven't gone through a full preseason, that's going to put them at risk of injury as well. So they obviously don't have the loads in the legs. They haven't done as much running. And then obviously when you hit the games, you can try and manage throughout through time on ground. But at the same time, the intensity of an AFL game is huge. So the chance of incurring an injury, I think, is probably higher. So really you want to be getting a full preseason. It's also going to impact the role. So if you're, I don't know, trying to think of someone like Dunkley, I guess, from last year, like obviously he came back, his role was impacted. He clearly wasn't as fit as he was when he went out. So that's going to impact his ability to score points. So if they've gotten through a full preseason, whatever you're projecting their upper ceiling is, they're more likely to hit that. So I think that's really important to look at.
Perfect. All right. What about their fixture or like strength of schedule?
Not at all. Not at all. That's just overcomplicating it for me. Not like you could potentially use it like to separate two players. Like if you thought, I don't know, Took Miller and Clayton Oliver were going to be the exact same scoring, but Melbourne play really early, same as McRae. Well, maybe you jump on Took, who's going to have a bunch of Sunday games. Maybe as the last thing that's going to split hairs, but it's not something I'd consider too much.
All right. And then finally, which I think I kind of get a feeling for what the answer is going to be based on what you've just said, but whether or not the team is projected to improve or get more wins in a year.
Yeah.
Or I guess conversely fall off.
Yeah. Look, it's a case-by-case basis, that one, I think. So you sort of look at someone like Dusty. I think if Richmond bounce back, hope they don't. If they were to bounce back and, win 12, 13, even 15 games, that's going to put Dusty in that high half forward midfield rotation role, having more opportunities to score points. He might kick an extra goal every couple of games or what have you. So that could certainly make him a little bit more relevant and increase his, I guess, ceiling. There's also extra scaling there. So that's certainly something I consider, as well as the chance they might get shut down late in the season as well, or managed if they've got enough wins to make finals, or they've just completely missed out and they've gone the tanking route. So something to consider. I'd rather have players from winning sides as a rule. And I guess like if they're on the regression, it really depends on the player. Obviously, if you're going for a forward, that's not good. If you're going for a defender that takes a lot of kick-ins, say, Aaron Hall, and they're just going to get pummeled every week at North, and that's what you think, well, that might even increase his scoring because the ball's going to be down there a lot. So case-by-case basis, but it's not something I'd put too much weight into, and just sort of maybe considering what the difference between each player.
Yeah, it almost sounds like another one of those criteria you might use as a tiebreaker rather than as the main thing you consider.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Well, to finish this off, we're going to go into start, watch, drop, which I guess is a little bit like snog, marry, kill. So I'm going to offer you up 3 players, and you're not going to snog or marry them, but you are going to tell me which one you'd start, which one you'd put on your watch list for the preseason, and which one you'd drop of the 3. So let's jump in, and I'm keen to hear your thoughts on some of these players we kind of go through. So I'm going to start with the big 3 in the midfield in McRae, Steele, and Took.
Can I start them all?
Drop. No, you can't. No. That's the fun of the game. Is you can't. Because I have a feeling all 3 of these are in your team at the moment.
They were. Finances pushed one out. So McRae start, I think it's just been done over such a long period of time, and I think his role's so safe. Steele, a watch, although, he's certainly a start, can go 2 starts. And then Took a drop. I think the reason you drop Took is he's just had that one breakout year. I think he'll do it again, but if you have to differentiate between them, that'll do it.
Well, not to mention that Ben King going down, and I think they had Bowes as well go down, right? So this isn't good for the Gold Coast Suns bounce back. You want the wins maybe for your midfielders. All right, let's look at some of the mid-price options then. So Rao, Lipinski, and Shield start, watch, and drop. And if you haven't watched the Essendon Dogs scratch match today, Shield was in like every centre bounce. He had something like 85% or 88%, something like ridiculous like that.
Yeah, didn't watch it, but seen the stats. Start is Rao. He just has a huge ceiling, and I think what he could be, it puts him over the line. Shield is the watch. I'd love to see him do it again, but he's got a really attractive price point. I think he's only gone over 100 once, maybe twice in his career, and they were really low hundreds. So he doesn't really have that ceiling, and that's kind of what you need of someone at that price or close enough to it. So I'll watch him. We'll see how we go, and Lipinski drop.
Oh, why no Lipinski love?
There's a bit of love there for him. It's just unproven, I guess. Like, he's done it in the VFL. He's shown spurts at the Doggies. He's certainly going to have a much bigger role. Like, he's a viable pick, but out of those two, probably the least certain of. So I'll drop him.
All right. And then even cheaper in the midfield, we've got the low 200s range. We've got Berry, Caldwell, and Constable. Start, watch, drop. Who have you got?
I'll start Berry. He's proven he has that scoring before. Caldwell, he would have been the start, and then today he wasn't in much from what I could see. I think he had a fair few. Did he get some centre bounces late? But that was
he did get a few kind of sprinkled in later on, but he was mainly playing like half forward. It seemed to me for a lot of the game. It was interesting going from obviously the interclub the week before where it was just dominating the midfield to basically seeing very little of it. At the stoppages around the ground, he was pushing up into them, but he wasn't getting the CBAs like you would have expected maybe after last week.
Yeah. So I'll watch him drop Constable.
Yeah, I think the dropping Constable is pretty easy because they've already moved him to half back, and even then there's still rumours he's not best 22. So yeah, that's a bit scary. All right, moving into the forwards, one that you've kind of already mentioned is a bit contentious. A lot of similar value picks that are all apparently getting midfield time this year. So let's start off with Heaney, Butters, and Taron Thomas.
This is almost harder than McRae Steele and Took. Yeah, I'll start Butters. I think. Again, like he's shown that at the start of last year how good he can be. The noise around his midfield time, being a full-time mid, puts me over the line. He's one that hasn't left my side. Heaney, I'll watch. You need to see that midfield role change. If he gets that, like he could be anything. He's such a super talented player. And I'll drop Taron Thomas, but it hurts me to do it.
Yeah, the Heaney one's interesting because obviously we've been promised midfield time from Longmire for like the last 3 or 4 years. But from the way it's been said this preseason, it is by far the strongest signal that we've gotten. It's not like, oh, he's going to get more mid-time. It's like, no, he's going to play as a midfielder, which to me is like quite comforting. But yeah, I mean, who knows? He's got us. He's tricked us in the past. All right, let's go some cheaper options then. So Rayner, Gresham, and Coleman.
Coleman first. Partly because he's a mid-price defender, and we might need one of those. So I think at his price point, what he showed at the end of last year, I think he's got that certainly upside to make enough cash. I'll watch Gresham. At his price, it's really awkward. Like he needs to be that sort of 90 player. He did it for 2 games at the start of last season and then missed the whole year. So like everyone's fairly bullish on him and he could certainly do it, but I'm not sure what that upper ceiling is. So let's see how he goes. And Rayner, I'll drop Rayner. I just find him so risky. Like he could be a points per minute beast, but he also might, just pick up 18 touches a game and go at low 70s, which probably isn't gonna do it for us.
Yeah. I think the thing I'm most worried about with Rayner is he seems like he is a high impact per possession, but just a low possession player. And I wouldn't back someone coming off an ACL to all of a sudden go from 12 or 14 average touches per game up to the mid 20s or low to mid 20s. It scares me quite a bit. All right. This one I think might even be tougher again, but maybe not. It's the big 3 of the rucks. It's Grundy, Darcy, and Gawn.
Grundy, probably the safest of the mids, I think. I need to watch Darcy because Darcy, he's one that I started. Like he was probably my second pick when SuperCoach opened up. His scoring ceiling is just crazy. Like the way he can impact the contest and does really good things around the ground and such a dominant tap ruckman. So I'll watch him. Need to see if he's fit. Really doesn't seem like he is though. And I'll drop Gawn, but I think I'll start at big 2 and Gawn could easily be in there.
Yeah, I mean, the Darcy thing's interesting because it is the big ceiling and the fact that, he had niggles but played through all of them last year. So maybe he shouldn't be that concerned. But how many stories can you hear in one preseason about him having to sit out of training or be strapped or have a fraction thing before you go oh, maybe this isn't a good pick?
It's certainly a risky one. If you didn't take him and he comes out and does what he did in the middle of last year, yeah, that would hurt. So
Yeah, it would be bad. All right, and then finally some defenders: Dawson, Ridley, and Short.
Yeah, Dawson start. I think the upside's the biggest there. What he showed at the end of last year. Then you got Ridley as a watch. Yeah, I didn't watch today, but apparently he didn't get any of the kickouts or very few. So that's really concerning when it comes to Ridley.
So the story on Ridley is weird because he was off the ground for like half of the first quarter, and I'm not sure what was going on there. Like he didn't cop an obvious knock, so I'm not sure if they were just like trying something in defense and they took him off to do it. But yeah, like during that period, whoever was closest just took them, it seemed. And then Redmond took a couple in the second quarter, and then there was no other points scored from the Dogs for like 2.5 quarters. And so Ridley was like super quiet in the first quarter, but then in the second quarter, he actually started taking a fair few intercept marks and getting involved in the game a little bit more. So I know a lot of people probably got scared off from Ridley on the back of that, but to me, it didn't feel like they're actually playing their proper defense for the first half, which makes it really hard to evaluate.
Yeah. I seen he took a ripper specky too, which is nice. Contested mark, I think that's 8 points or something.
He had a few contested like intercept marks, probably at least like 4 or 5 that I think that I saw.
Yeah. So yeah, like I'm really big on him, but need to see how that role pans out. And then I'll drop Short. I just don't think the ceiling.
Yeah, the ceiling. Okay.
Yeah. Like he clearly scored more when Hooley was out the side, and that makes him pretty viable. But at the same time, I just think, for him, I think he'll just be a little bit up and down. Like he doesn't do enough in the air. He doesn't quite collect enough behind the ball. Poor man's Jake Lloyd, I think. He's just going to be, about 15 points behind him. He's a good Lloyd, so I think Lloyd will go
15 points behind. That's huge.
I think Lloyd will go mid-teens, low teens, and then Short will average around 100, maybe 103. So yeah.
Okay. All right. I can see that. All right. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me. It's been a really insightful video, at least for me anyway. I don't know what the viewers will think. I guess I should give you a chance to plug your stuff before we sign off.
So I'm on Twitter at Babylon9268. Don't ask where I came up with that. That's above. And the season guide is up. It's running. So over at moirasmagic.com.au. The link will be in my Twitter bio. Over there, we've got obviously the SuperCoach season guide. We've got the AFL fantasy season guide. So you can get stuck into that. Maybe win a Toyota that you can drive your tracksuit in.
Yeah, I mean, winning both in the 1 year would be pretty amazing. So I guess that's the aim over at Moreira's Magic, to have someone kind of win both, or at least like top 10 in both. Would be pretty epic. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you once again for being on. It's been a pleasure, and I will see you all in the next one.
Thanks, Eves.